Hi everyone, and welcome to my tutorial on how I created my Drop Zero art challenge piece. Just to tell you a bit about the competition, it's from Photomanipulation.com. If you're here, you probably already know about them, but if you don't, they're an amazing stock website. And not only that, they provide training. They have a huge YouTube channel that's just taught me so much over the time that I've been doing this. They're a great team, and they're very active in the community. They're always on hand helping. They're just fantastic. But every now and then they will come out with a competition that members of the community can join. So if you go to their website, the link's down in the description. If you do buy anything from the website, I have affiliate links down below, and there's more information on that at the end of the video. But yeah, if you could use them, that would help the channel out massively. But yeah, if you go on their website and their about section, there's the contest here. It's the Drop Zero Art Challenge. Basically, in summary, they've provided these stocks, this bundle of stocks. I think there's about 220 stocks in there, and all of those images are commercially licensed, and we can just have them. They've just given them us for free, which is absolutely awesome. But the whole point is to take part in this art challenge, and I think the rule is 80% of their stocks that's provided for this challenge, and 20% of whatever else you might use. I ended up using 99.9% of the stocks that they provided, and 0.1%, which was just create some magic wisps and some windy wisps, which I used their magic bundle for anyway. So everything in this piece that you're about to see is done from the stocks of this challenge. It's really good. There's loads of information at the end as well. Probably by the time you're seeing this video, the contest is already over. We've got maybe 5 more days, so actually you probably still have time, if you do see this, to go and check it out. But they run these contests quite often. The last one I think was Halloween, so they do come about, and they're well worth getting involved with, because it's a challenge. It's another piece of artwork to help you learn and grow, and they're just hellishly fun. There's always cool themes. There's always some twist and some cool aspect to the challenge as well. So really enjoyed it. I've done this tutorial. There's sections of speed arts. There's sections of me narrating and talking about what I'm doing. If you want more lengthy, in-depth descriptions and tutorials of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, then please do let me know, and I will make sure to make videos on those too. But enjoy the video, and I'll see you next time. So all I'm doing in this section is I'm deciding whether I'm going to work with the background first or the foreground. In this particular instance, I've decided to go with the foreground first. It's just where most of the focus is that I want people's eyes to go to when they look at this, where the characters are, and there's a lot more going on. The backdrop is literally just going to be an addition to the story, to the characters, to that mystery and to that awe. And the main focus is going to be the characters at the front. So the tool that I use, if you have a stock image like this one, where it's a light sky, it's a light background, and the object that you're trying to cut out is dark, it contrasts well against it, you can use the object selection tool to get a quick selection of the object that you're trying to cut out, layer mask it, and then I just go ahead with the paintbrush and a black hard brush, go in and paint out the bits that the object selection tool missed. It's a really good tool. You'll see me use it quite a lot in this, because it does save time on cutting out. If something is really complicated and I'm cutting something out of a very complicated background, of course I'll go in with the pen tool and I'll really take my time to make sure it's cut out well, and I will use select and mask and other different tools. But for things like this and the models in these particular stock photography that I'm using here, it's really simple and really quick just to go ahead, use that object selection tool, and then go ahead and clean it up later on with the brush. And that's what I've done in this instance. So you can see the sketch just behind. So I do, when I'm creating these pieces, I pretty much finish it to a sort of mediocre standard. I get all the stocks, I look at the lighting, I put some basic shadows and highlights, and then I just flatten that down as a layer and I use it as a sketch. Now this takes a little bit more time. It takes roughly, I spend about half an hour, 45 minutes just creating that basic sketch, but it allows me to then have a clear understanding of the composition, what I had in mind, and it allows me just to go ahead and concentrate on getting everything cut out cleanly and getting all the highlights and the lighting and everything working well. So I find it massively useful having, for me, a sketch beforehand to work from, and you'll see here that I refer to the sketch quite a lot. So again, I've just used for this guy the object selection tool. I've just selected him because he's quite a dark figure. He's browns and blacks against a light grey background, so the object selection tool there helped loads again. And then I'm just placing them in where I had planned to put them in from the sketch. Luckily these images are PNGs, so these are already cut out from the stocks. I don't have to do any work to cut them out. They were already pre-cut, which is really, really cool. The work's already done for me, and I'm just placing everything in. Some things will change. It's a rough sketch, it's a basic sketch, nothing set in stone, but it does give me a good idea and a good plan to work from. And you'll see that with this guy changes quite a lot. I do quite a lot of editing to him, and I sort of steal stocks from a few of the stocks provided to actually create the warrior in the end. This particular bit is where the sorceress is going to sit and is going to stand. So I needed some additional rocks just to push her up slightly. So I literally just used the same foreground, because again we're limited on stocks here. So I just used the same foreground. It's got the same textures, the same grass, the same colouring, and I just raised it up so I could put her to be at the similar level as everyone else. What you've got to be careful with when you're doing stuff like this is not to use a section that's been repeated, that's already been used somewhere else and it's obviously been repeated. So I'm blending it in here just to look at part of the rock. So I've kept some grass in. I've used two sections of that whole foreground to create this bit, and I've done that, and I've took a small section because when you look at the piece on a whole, you're not really going to tell that I've just stolen, I've just copied and duplicated the same foreground image. So be really careful with that there's not a lot of repetition in your artwork, because people will pick up on it. If you use the same tree 4 times in a section as a group, people will pick up on it pretty quick. So these next sections I'm going to let play out, and I'll come back in when there's something important to say, but this is just working on the general overall lighting and just getting some shadows and getting the feel and the mood and the atmosphere right. It takes a lot of playing around with, and it takes a lot of trial and error. I think, I used to be worried about sort of showing my whole process because there's loads of trial and error, but I think that produces the best work is when you just take the time to really see what works, see what isn't working, and test out a variety of different methods of achieving an end goal, like lighting here. So got the characters in, got the foreground in, and I'm going to let this next section play out. So this next bit is similar. I'm just piecing bits together. I'm using the sketch. I'm figuring out where the light's going to be, and the light's going to be behind this main structure, these main rock formations here. And I'm just putting in some quick lighting, some quick colouring, because the sky, when I saw this sky stock, it just straight away I was like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I know what colours, this is going to look really, really cool. And you can do a lot of post-colour work in Camera Raw Filter, which I'll talk about when we get to that bit. But yeah, for this bit, I knew the sort of colouring that I wanted to go for. So I'm just putting in some basic colours. I'm using a solid fill colour. In the adjustment layers, if you go to solid fill and put in a solid fill and choose with the eyedropper tool a colour from the background from your sky, because that's what dictates the colouring of your thing, you know, light, the sky, the atmosphere. It dictates what colour things are, and the further things are away, the atmosphere, it literally will dictate, like I said, the colouring of your piece and the objects that you put in them. So these stairs, for example, and these rock formations, I've done some basic lighting work, and I'm just cutting out and putting pieces in together where I want things to go alongside with my sketch. But I've literally just using a solid colour, and I'm just brushing in a basic sort of atmospheric cloud sort of mist at the front there, because what that does is it creates an atmosphere. It also allows me to really highlight and contrast the foreground from the background. So as you can see, the foreground is a lot darker than the background, and this gives us the sense that that backdrop is a little bit further away than the actual foreground and where our characters are going to be. So in the foreground will be a lot darker, you will see more detail, there won't be much atmosphere, and you won't see much haze and this mist that you can see in front of the foreground because it's so close to you. But as things get further away, and now these stairs and these rock formations are pretty big, they're quite a big structure, but they're not massively far away. So there is some haze, there is some atmosphere in front of them and creating that mist, but there's not a ton of it, and it just really allows you to create depth in your artwork. So again, with the atmosphere, with the lighting, with where the light's coming from the back, the way the sky is, I wanted to create and use this colour palette and colouring the rock formation and the stairs with a similar, this sort of ashy, sandy, ash blonde sort of colouring. It makes everything look believable, which is our goal, isn't it? You know, these are fantasies, these are, you know, surreal pictures, but there has to be an element of believability about them. They have to kind of look like they work together, and this is a great example and a great tip, is just work with some basic lighting. As things get further away, they get lighter, they take on more colour of the background and the backdrop, and the closer things are, like this foreground, the darker, the more immediate, the less interrupted and the less affected by atmosphere and dust and haze and these little speckles of dirt affected they are. So this is a really cool way of blending images in, and I've just had a little bit of trouble with getting this to look like it's formed part of the rock, but I'll fix that later with some shadows. So here I'm just adding in some real basic shadows. I'm just trying to determine where the light's going to come from. So, you know, the stairs there, you can see there's already quite a bit of light on the right hand side of the stairs, so all I've got to do is block out some shadows on the front. So when you're selecting stock images, and again this is a challenge, so we were limited on the stocks that we could use. I've only used the stocks that are provided for the challenge. You've got to be really careful and try and make your life a bit easier by selecting stocks and selecting images where the light's already working in your favor. So I knew from the sky that there was a sun there that was producing this light from the stock before I even edited it, so I knew that was a good backdrop lighting. And when I looked at the stairs, I could see the light hitting the right hand side of the staircase. So again, that does a lot of work for me. I'm not trying to get rid and edit out that light to try and force light somewhere. It's already there, and it makes my life 10 times easier when it comes to editing. So in this bit right here, if I showed you the real footage of this, you would see it slow down a lot. So when I'm adding that linear dodge add, that color fill with the linear dodge add as a layer, you will see when I'm painting in, I'm doing it very slowly, and my flow of my brush is always about 4 when I'm painting in light and atmosphere, because it just allows you to control how much you're putting on. So when I'm working with light and I'm working with these overall big light sources, I just slowly and gradually add it in. When I'm working with the mist at the front, I'm slowly and gradually adding it in, because when I first started out, I would hit the flow and the opacity of the brush up to 100, and I would try and block out these big bits of light and then try and get rid of them, and it was hard to control the amount of light, and I would always end up, you'll see from my previous works that some of the lighting is really quite strong and it's overpowering, and it forced pieces of my work to become something that they weren't originally planned to be, because I just overdid it with the light. But when you're brushing in light, whatever method that you're using, I do recommend using, you can keep opacity at 100 but crank down the flow to like 4 or 5. If you need a little bit more, maybe 16 to 25, something like that, and just slowly but surely block in and paint in the light, because again, you can zoom out, you can have a look and think, actually that is just enough. If I go any more, I'm going to ruin it, and it just gives you a real greater control of the pieces of work, the light that you're putting in your pieces of work. So these were cool. I really love, like, they're almost borderline like science fiction structures, these big rings. They're almost pushing into the zone of sci-fi. Originally I was gonna add some sort of sci-fi element to it, but then I thought, no, just keep it purely fantasy, and the usual sort of fantasy tropes. But I did quite like these lights. I thought they were really cool. I liked that tunnel, and I really do like these sort of fascinating structures, and these unbelievable sort of ancient ruins that have just been found by these explorers, by this band of heroes. I've never lost that love of these awesome structures that, you know, who created them, where were they created, how were they created, but they're so magnificent and big. So you'll see in quite a few of my works I try and include elements of that. And these tunnels that were provided in the CG background were just perfect for that, and it created this real cool, different type of structure that we used to seeing. So I really, really liked adding these in. And all I'm doing is I have them all grouped in a folder, and I'm applying effects and adjustment layers on top of the whole group. I will say for these rings, and this is one of the big things I wanted to get across with this video, is time and patience. You know, I've been in the past, you know, too eager to sort of get an artwork out there and, you know, just try and wow people straight away, and it just doesn't always work. Now these rings, they took me quite a long time in a sense to edit them in and to get them real exactly how I wanted them to look. And it was a lot of time playing with the adjustment layers, so you can see here I'm playing with the levels quite a lot. And it was worth it. You know, I would finish it, you'll see me go back to it later on to edit it even more, and it was really worth the investment of time to get it exactly how I wanted it, to a point where I was proud then to put it out. So I know the anticipation and the eagerness to get work out there and just show off these artworks is really sort of a big thing to sort of deal with when we're creating. But I can't emphasize enough and put power to how important time and patience is with these pieces of work. I said it in one of my, I think it was my Instagram post, that it was my Facebook post, that I started, you know, I finished this about 5 times and I thought, yeah, that's done. And then I saw something or some little section, you know, I went away, I had a walk with the dog, or I went to sleep, and I came back to it the next day and I thought, it's still not quite done, there's still something I'm missing here. And I really had to battle with that eagerness just to post it and move on to the next piece of client work or whatever else I was doing. But just take that time. I'm going back here to the trees. As I put in another layer, this tree, I realised that the mid ground, those mid rock formations, need just a little bit of extra shadow work. I'm constantly going back and fixing and editing, and I think it's getting over that idea of perfection as well. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if there's things that you can see that aren't quite right, keep playing with it until you're happy with it, until you're satisfied with the end outcome. So now I'm actually starting to add in the characters. I'm starting to apply shadows and lighting to them. I'm just getting a quick sense of where the light's coming from and hitting them, and I'm just quickly blocking in those different things. You can see now on the wizard that I'm colouring the cloak. I was going to leave it originally, and this is one of those moments again of thinking about, you know, how I can better this, and I thought, let's change the colour, let's just add a little bit of difference and add a little bit of visual interest to it, so let's change the colour of his cloak. And the way I did that was I used a hue and saturation which was set to colour instead of normal or screen or overlay or multiply. Set it to colour, and then I just coloured over the section that I wanted to turn green. So hue and saturation, set the layer style to colour, and then just paint over the sections that you want. It takes a little bit of, again, playing with the settings, and it takes a little bit of messing with the adjustment layer itself, so you have to play with the colour, the lightness, the darkness, until you get it to a place where you're happy with. But it's a really, really good way of colouring clothing, mounting, you know, landscapes, objects. It's a really good, useful tool for that. So this next section was one of my favourite parts of this piece, was creating the warrior. So the original stock, as you can see, is a guy clearly for a different sort of genre and a theme, leather jacket, jeans, boots, and a baseball bat. But I wanted to create this warrior type figure to sort of complete that genre trope of a band of heroes. There's a ranger, a wizard, a warrior. So I found this other CG character within the pack that we were given, and he had this really cool looking axe, and I thought, let's give this warrior a nice big axe. So this is a good example here. I'm having to go in with the pen tool and cut this out. The object selection tool or the quick selection tool wouldn't work here. I wouldn't get a clean as cutout that I needed. So I've gone in there with the pen tool and I've used that to cut this selection out. And it takes a little bit longer, but it's definitely worth it. The results just sort of speak for themselves when you cut out something with the pen tool. It's fantastic. If you're starting out and you're a beginner, I highly recommend just going straight for every time, getting used to the pen tool. Whatever you're cutting out, just use the pen tool and get used to it. So I'm erasing that baseball bat because the top of the baseball bat is quite thick and the bar of this axe is quite thin, so I'm just getting rid of sections of the baseball bat. And basically what I'm doing is using sections of the axe handle to fill in for the baseball bat. So I'm just adding in the handle here, and obviously it's going through his hand. It's really quite lucky that was a similar sort of thickness at the bottom, so it didn't take too much work to make it look like he's actually holding it. And then I just took that bottom bit of the handle and extended it, because it's wood, it's the same texture, it's the same grain, so I just extended it and use that section as the whole sort of bar of the axe. So this next bit, I had to think of a way to create the back of our warrior, and it was a bit of a challenge. Firstly, I tried this cloak and it kind of just wasn't working out. I think if I had persevered with it a bit more, maybe painted over it a little bit more and tried some different things, it possibly could have worked, because the way the angle of the model that I took it from is kind of similar to him, but I was messing around with it and I just couldn't quite get it to look how I wanted it to look. It looked kind of clunky, so in the end I opted for another sort of way out of this. But it's good. Here I'm using the warp tool, you'll see, and the sort of the shadows cast by the material were just too big and it just looked really, really weird. Even though these are kind of small on the canvas, these characters, it still was too, you could clearly see that it just looked really weird. So again, trying a few different things. I did like the texture and the pattern work on this guy though. I liked that sort of, that armoured sort of scale-like pattern. and I thought that would be really good to get rid of his leather jacket and the tops of his jeans as well, so I can use that. So that was really good. I'll let this bit play out, and then I'll come back when I get the other cloak working and the rest of it. So after trying many different things, I decided to go back and just use the same cloak from one of our other main characters. Now, you may have thought, oh, you said before about, repetition, don't use the same thing. But I think I sort of manipulated this enough and made it look as though the guy, it's not the exact same cloak. So again, just using the warp tool. The warp tool is really, really powerful for just making slight adjustments and tweaks to whatever it is that you're trying to fix on someone. I find it really useful with clothing, because you can just because it is material, so when you warp it and move it, it kind of stays in a natural sort of look. It doesn't look weird. If you try and warp other things, you can kind of like warp mountains and create some cool shapes out of them as well. But I find it really works well on clothing, and just moving the clothing naturally and keeping it sort of to the body of the model that you're putting it on. So the warp tool is really, really good for that sort of thing. And here I've kind of got the cape the cloak how I want it, and I'm just creating a little arm for this guy now. And again, just lots of the warp tool. All I'm doing is just stealing patterns and pieces of this armor that I want. I'm literally just masking them out, copying them, and then pasting them down again to use them for whatever I want to use them for. So this little sort of section is just the cuff of the end of the sleeve of his armor. And I'm searching round for some feet. Now the feet was quite difficult because his feet are at a particular angle, and his body, if you stand your feet, often when I'm trying to get a pose, when I'm doing like 3D work, I will do the pose myself. I'll either take a picture of myself doing the pose to see how my feet are naturally, to see what my arms look like when I'm in a certain pose. So because we had limited stocks in this one, I really just had to work with what I had at my disposal, and this was it. Again, from the Ranger, I took the boots from there, and I decided to apply them to the Warrior, same as I did with the cloak from the Wizard. So it's a kind of like mismatch, and you can get away with this sort of stuff with a bit of distortion. I'm using the distort tool to sort of distort the perspective. With the distort tool and using scale, you can kind of get away with it. And the way he stood, for his foot to be like that wouldn't be that unnatural. It doesn't look odd to the eye, so I got away with it in this case, and I managed to still stay true to only using the stocks that were provided. This little left boot though gave me some trouble. I was like looking at it, I was like, oh no, some positions of that foot were just not right at all. So I decided to put it back in and place it here, which again is a normal, natural sort of way for that foot would be, and it doesn't look anything out of the ordinary. It looks all okay. And I'm going to do the same again here now. I'm going to colour. So once I've manipulated this guy all together, I'm going to collapse and merge that whole group and put it into a smart object. So if I really need to, I can go back later on and individually edit all the pieces, but it looks okay. So collapse it into a smart object, and then you can start applying your adjustments then. So here again, I'm just doing some shadows. He's going to be quite in the shadow because there's not a lot of light hitting him. It's only really his face that would be quite visible. The rest of him would be quite dark. So I'm just sort of fixing that up now. Same thing again. I thought, should I leave his cloak like brown? But then I thought, no, let's give him a nice red cloak. And I did the exact same thing again. I played with the hue and saturation layer and set the layer style to color, so I can just paint over exactly where I want the color to be, and everything else on my guy stays exactly the same. I suppose a little tip, but if you overpaint, see right here I've painted over his face. I've gone over sort of where I need to be. Sometimes that is easier, just to overpaint and then delete and paint in black on the layer mask the stuff, paint it away. Sometimes that is easier. And just some light work again. I found, with the thing of time and patience in mind, I've really found that lighting and doing highlights and working with exposure, the exposure adjustment layer, it's a lot of trial and error, and especially when you're combining it with the hue and saturation adjustment as well, because this is all great now, he's got highlights on him, but we need that highlight to be in colour. So there you can see I've just added the hue and saturation, and I'm just playing around now with those highlights. So the colour of the light is so vivid from the sky and the sun, and all the other highlights have colour. So same again, exposure layer to create the highlights, and then you want to colour them with the hue and saturation, and you want to go into the layer styles and go to blend if and sort of fiddle with that until you get it exactly how you want it. You'll have to let me know if you want like a really slowed down tutorial, because I do like speed arts, and a great tip for if you love a creator who creates content on YouTube and does speed art solely, if you think of people like Learning Screen, amazing creators that just create speed arts. What you can do is you can pay for them. I know Learning Screen has some. You can pay for the files and stuff that you can dissect yourself. But there's a feature on YouTube where you literally can just turn it down to half speed or a quarter speed, and you can watch it in slow motion. I've learned a lot of things by just watching people in slow motion and seeing what they do and what effects they're using and how they're doing it. So that's a good tip to remember. It helped me out a lot. So right now I'm just painting in the shadows of the shadows of the characters that is cast on the foreground. And whilst I was doing this, I noticed that the foreground was too dark. So you could see the shadows, and again, sometimes you don't want to be over the top with things, but you couldn't really see what I was doing here. So even when it was kind of irrelevant pointing in the shadows. So again, this is all the trial and error and tweaking sort of thing. I had to go back and brighten up, because you can see there it's almost black. Now that's okay for a foreground, because sometimes things can be so close that they're black, there's no detail, there's no anything, and it can be a great way to create depth of field. But for this, it's kind of further away. I want to see some detail of the legs, and I want to see some shadows, and I want to see those really pop later on. So yeah, I had to lighten the foreground after this, and yeah, it's really important. And again, by doing that, by lightening up the foreground, I found out and I figured out that the sorceress was a little bit too dark as well, and there were just some elements. So by doing that, it allowed me to tweak those little bits as well. And again, it's just time, and it's just patience, and it's just trial and error. So you can see here, I'm painting on, I've got a solid fill colour, and I've selected the colour of the light, and I'm using a screen adjustment screen. I'm using screen for the layer adjustment and for the layer style. So I'm just painting on some slight glow, and I've literally got my flow at 4, so that it's barely applying this brush and it's barely applying this colour, and I'm just adding some accent sort of glow and highlights to really make the highlights on the characters pop. Normally this is a good tip to do with like rim light as well. There's loads of tutorials on there, but if you want some like in-depth, these are some techniques to do it, just let me know. But yeah, if you're doing rim lights, that technique can really make them pop even more. I didn't want to add too many rim lights on this because I just found it didn't need it. It didn't need it. The light wasn't too intense, so that was fine. So now the big piece of the puzzle and the big plot. Who is this mystical figure? Who is this character? Who is this person? It's that little bit of mystery, that little bit of wonder. And why are our heroes sort of bracing for combat with this guy, with this woman? Like, who knows? You can't really see the figure. And again, the figure is small, so you just got to get the size right. Too big, and he's going to be the size of those huge structures. Too small, and you ain't going to see him like at all. It's going to be near enough pointless putting him there. So just get a gist. And what I usually do is I look at the stairs that he's on, and I kind of like walk him down the stairs. Like if he was walking down the stairs from this distance, would it look right? Are the stairs huge and he's tiny? Is he huge and the stairs are tiny? So that's kind of just how I did this one. This was quite a nice sort of perspective and viewpoint to go from. So I found that the wizard had no elements that made him a wizard. So I stole the staff from our character that's off in the distance, and I just thought I'm going to customize this to make it his own and give him a staff. So I've just copied that over and put it into the sort of position where I want it, and I'm just going to cut off the hands of our wizard, because if he was holding it, obviously his hands wouldn't be like that, they would be gripping. So I've just put his hand in sort of like a gripping in a gripping pose, that he's gripping the staff. So yeah, so just be wary of that if you're using stocks and things. Obviously the hands aren't always going to be perfect for what you need it for, so you have to do a little bit of work there. Then I wanted to use some more stocks, and this is a case of you can plan out yours. Like I've done my sketch and everything, but then I saw these wings and I was like, ooh, I can give his staff a bit of his own uniqueness and his own vibe, so I thought I'll use the wings to do that. Here I'm looking for some textures. I kind of wanted the textures of the ancient ruins to be sort of old and sort of mouldy and grimy and grim, but I didn't end up using the textures. I did try them, but I just found that didn't really need it, didn't really want it, so yeah, I moved on from that. Just doing some more edits to our wizard. I thought, hey, he's got a green cloak and a green thing, so why not give him a green powerful staff as well? I probably could have done a bit more edits to the staff, but I didn't want to go over the top, and I felt like this was just enough. Here, I kind of looked at it and I thought, hey, it looks kind of weird, like with the wings at the top. And then I was playing around with it and I looked at it again and I thought, actually no. Actually the wings are quite alright where they are, so I left them. And again, I'm just using an exposure layer here. Exposure, taking that quite high up and then painting on some highlights, and then using hue and saturation to give it the colour of the sky and the light that's actually hitting it. So I've tested the colour, I'm happy with the colour. Just give it that little bit of light in there and that little bit of highlights. Again, I was like, oh, do I like it, do I not? And I was like, nah, I quite like it. It was growing on me, I kind of liked it. So I'm going to let the rest of this play out, and I'm going to come and talk to you at the end. Actually, just before I do, so this flow again, this is just another example of using flow at 4 with a brush and using a linear dodge add layer style to a solid colour to create glow. Just ever so slightly And again here with the orange, just ever so slightly paint it in, don't go over the top. See, I wanted some light here just to bring those main characters out from the background a little bit more. So again, I'm not going over the top. I used to have a real tendency here to go over the top with light, and sometimes it just doesn't need it. The light isn't meant to be too intense. You're setting an atmosphere, you're creating a mood. So yeah, don't go too intense. Just gradually build in the light. Take a step back and then stop when it's good, and don't carry on. You know, it's good however your eye says it's good. It's good. So this is where I was actually playing with the textures, and I was looking at it and I was like, nah, probably could have played with some other ones, some other different textures, but I thought they look fine as they are, so I'm not going to carry on doing that. Here I'm just playing with some lenses, and maybe this is that sort of creeping in of over the top sort ofness. Maybe some light rays would have been cool, but I went for a different idea in the end. I didn't want any light rays or anything like that. I just found it sat nice enough as it was. So I'm going to let the rest of these last little bits play out. You will notice the artwork looks a lot different at the very end, and I'll explain why then. Enjoy the rest of it. So the final image. Now this looks really, really heavily edited, even more. And there is a reason for that. That is because I do some last minute edits in Camera Raw filter and with some overall layers just to create some extra end highlights and some extra end effects. The wisps and the smoke is a brush, but the wisps and the wind that's flowing through is just an added touch, and I did use the Photomanipulation.com Ultimate Magic bundle, so they are the only things that are not actually included in this stock art challenge. The rules of the challenge was like 80% of the stocks and 20% of whatever else you want to use, but mine's more like 99.9% stocks from the competition, and there's 0.1 of those outside sources, but it's still Photomanipulation.com. I wish I could have done more with the title, but I just ran out of time. But I like it anyway. It fits, it looks nice, it looks really cool for a book cover. And obviously Photomanipulation.com at the top. If you do check them out, they're awesome. If you're into this, or if you're here, you probably already know about them, but if you do like their stuff, please use the links down below and purchase from those links, because they're affiliate links and it does help the channel. It helps me out massively. And there's a ton of stuff on Photomanipulation.com that I use. I only ever affiliate with people and companies that I trust and that I like and that I use myself. Photomanipulation.com, I own many of their bundles, I own many of their model stocks. There's a ton of stuff that over the past year or so since I've been doing this, I've used from them. They're absolutely awesome. The founder is amazing in the community. They're just a really well trusted company to get your stocks from. So with that being said, thank you so much for checking out the video. Again, like I said about the extra added Camera Raw filter stuff, I will do some tutorials on that and I will show that. So yeah, so keep your eyes peeled for them. But I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've learned something. It would mean the world to me if you did, and thank you so much for stopping by. Take care.